Hey, so as is probably readily apparent, this channel was supposed to be like a mainly like manga channel, pretty much only like manga videos. And I haven't made a manga video in a very long time, but I thought it would be better as just doing videos that I want to do. Niches are cool, but I just kind of wanted to like do my own thing. But with that said, I am actually making a manga video again because I do love manga. So today I'm gonna do a review on Dissolving Classroom by Junji Ito. It's actually my first Junji Ito book that I've ever read. He's certainly an interesting guy. I'll say that much after reading this. He's definitely a very interesting guy with a fascinating mind. But before I get into my review, I'm actually doing a little giveaway. I'm going to be giving away volumes 1 and 2 of Seven Deadly Sins. And if you don't want them, don't enter. But yeah, I wanted to give these two little books away as a token of my appreciation if you watch my videos. And all you have to do to enter said giveaway is just leave a comment, maybe about your favorite part of the video, complimenting my better haircut now. You can comment anything as long as it's not negative. I'm kidding. Even a negative comment can get you entered too. I don't know why I'm rambling. On my next video, I'll announce the username of the person who won, and you can contact me through email or through Twitter or X if you're lame, and I will get those to you. So Dissolving Classroom is really interesting because it's kind of, I guess it's like a semi-anthology book in that it's about two characters who are prominently in almost every but two short stories in this book, Chizumi and Yuma Ozawa. They are brother and sister, and they are ridiculously fucked up, very crazy individuals. And the first short story is called... So Dissolving Classroom is the first short story in this book, and it's a very thrilling look at the sort of cyclical nature that this book brings. So it starts off following this girl named Keiko, and at Keiko's school there's a new transfer student named Yuma Ozawa. He's a really quirky guy because he just has this thing where he's like always apologizing to people for pretty much no reason at all, and it's just very strange. But after school, Keiko is walking home and she's chased by this like demonic little girl. She's saying that she wants to like eat brains and a bunch of other crazy shit. And while running from her, Keiko is hit by a truck. Keiko wakes up in the hospital and Yuma is apologizing to her because that little girl named Chizumi is actually his sister. He explains that it's pretty much their parents' fault that Chizumi turned out the way he was, and Keiko follows him while he goes around town apologizing to various people. But when Keiko meets Chizumi, she reveals that no, her parents are actually dead as fuck, and Yuma's apologies are not what they seem. When Yuma apologizes to people, he's actually like talking to the devil, and he sees like the devil where the people are, and it causes people to melt or dissolve into this grotesque little slime. And the next day, things are like full tilt insane because everyone is dissolving, people are running around, everyone is terrified. But the issue is that Yuma didn't only melt the people at school, he also apologized to Keiko's parents, and they are not themselves anymore. But Keiko is sort of indifferent to this because she's been hearing a lot of these apologies, so she has like really apparent brain damage. It is tragic. The story ends with Keiko running through the school, and eventually she's cornered by Yuma, who starts apologizing to her, of course, and she like faints because she doesn't want to hear it, and she's obviously terrified because she knows that Chizumi is actually telling the truth, surprisingly enough. And things completely end when she wakes up in bed, and she says she doesn't really know what happened to Yuma and Chizumi, but she doesn't really want to know. And yeah, it's bleak. It's definitely bleak. I don't expect any happy endings, but we'll see. I thought this was a great introduction to the story. It was pretty well written. I think it just kept the tension up at most points. It wasn't, boring, but I wouldn't say there's not much risk of any stories being boring in Dissolving Classroom because every story is max maybe like 30 pages. They're all very brief and very, very fast-paced. I thought this was a good introduction, not stellar or anything, but it was very solid. And the next short story is... Okay, so Dissolving Beauty, I mean, I don't know if many people even know about this manga, But I could only assume that this one would be very underrated because this is personally my favorite short story of it. And it's not like very grand or insane, but I just think it is so fucking smart. So Yuma's back at it with a new trick this time. So we meet our new protagonist, whose name is Now, and she's meeting up with an old friend from middle school. But she's got this new boyfriend, and this new boyfriend is a familiar face. It's Yuma, of course. And things are kind of weird because Now's friend doesn't look right. There's something very off about her appearance. And it kind of fucks with your suspension of belief because she's busted, guys, okay? It's not like I'm not calling her ugly, like her face is like falling off the bone, so I guess Now was just trying to be polite by not saying anything, but it's a little almost ridiculous. But to be fair, these are stories about a kid who communicates with the devil by saying sorry, so it's not the most realistic thing, but that took me out of it a bit. And as you can probably guess, the cause for her to be falling off the bone, as I so eloquently put it, is that Yuma is giving her praise. This time he's not apologizing. When he gives praise to people, not so good things happen. But Now doesn't really know this, and Yuma ends up breaking up with Now's friend to get with Now. They're going on dates, things are going great, but slowly but surely, her face is getting a little weird. Things are getting a little unusual with Now. And one day, she stumbles into Chizumi. And Chizumi is a very blunt girl. She tells it how it is, and she tells her the whole secret of what's happening. When Yuma gives praise to people, he sees the devil, and that praise he gives to Satan disfigures the girls for whatever reason that he dates. At the end of the story, like a sly little criminal, he transfers schools along with Chizumi, and the last panel is just a very, very bad looking Now. Very bad. I just really like that this one is like really brief and just straight to the point. Like, you already kind of know like how things are gonna go, so this one doesn't hold your hand through it, it just goes through it. And the body horror is wonderful. Junji Ito is an incredible artist, and I was disgusted reading this, and that's a very high compliment, honestly. It got really dark at points, actually. Like, Now's friend, who Yuma broke up with, Now said she doesn't even know what happened to her, that she could have hurt herself or worse, but she doesn't really care. She falls so hard for Yuma that nothing else matters. And that is fucking crazy. That's wild. Look, I won't get into it too much now, but as you're going to see, the stories can be a little similar. Like, these ones weren't exactly the same principle, I guess, but it was kind of just substituting apologizing for praising. So things can get a little repetitive, but we'll touch on that later. Right now, let's have fun with it. The next story is actually pretty long. It goes into things pretty in depth, and that one is called... So our new protagonist is named Ogawara, and she's this young woman just living in an apartment. One day her door rings, and she's greeted by her new neighbors. Their names are the Azawas. I don't know, they just seem like a pretty nice couple. I can't think of anyone they'd have a relation to. But judging by the facts that their faces look more dead than the F-Zero franchise, it's probably Yuma's parents. It's probably them. They look tattered. As a little neighborly gift, which I've never had done by any of my neighbors, they gave her some mugwort mochi, which I would kill for. Mochi's really good. But I wouldn't kill for this one because actually she eats it and gets insane like diarrhea and other stomach problems. So yeah, no, I don't know why I said that. No, I would not eat that one. But I kind of put it nicely by saying stomach problems because she actually gets so violently sick she's considering calling an ambulance. So yeah, I would definitely pass on that one. But while going through this sickness, she hears like banging and a bunch of other crazy noises from upstairs where the Ozawas are. And it sounds like someone is getting hit, but also apologizing for the fact that they're getting hit. So you can probably guess who that is. Ogawara is disturbed by this, and she meets with a couple of her other neighbors outside who also got sick from said mochi. And they go to confront the Ozawas on their shitty food. And when they open the door, no one else other than Chizumi answers. And when they ask Chizumi about her parents, she says they are I'm kidding. They're dead. She says they're dead as hell, and while they walk away, she mocks the shit out of them. So Ogawara just goes back to chilling in her apartment, where she sees a head dangling down from the window. This was honestly one of the biggest scares I had during this. I'm honestly not someone who flinches much at horror stuff. I watch a good amount of horror movies and stuff, but it doesn't really get me. I'm not going to say this did either, but it was certainly unnerving. It looked very, very fucking disgusting. It was Chizumi. That weird little girl was dangling a human fucking head of her mother, no less, on the balcony. But what really like upset me reading it is that Ogawara wasn't like horrified. She wasn't like screaming at the top of her lungs like, oh my god, I just saw a dead person's head. No, she was just like kind of annoyed, like, that Chizumi's a real troublemaker. What? A human dead head? All I can think about is fucking catch me if you can. Sorry. A human dead head dangling from a balcony, and you think she's a troublemaker? Like, what world are we in these stories sometimes? So immersion breaking. My only theory is that she thought it was like paper mache or something, but I don't know. Manga to real life, you know, it's art to real life graphics, but that head looked very real. Looked very real to me. The only explanation I can have to defend it, if I were to sit on both sides of the fence, would be that, you know, these are just regular people in these stories up until the point where everything goes crazy. So they're assumed to be living in a regular world like you or me, you know? I wouldn't readily assume that my upstairs neighbor, well, I don't have an upstairs neighbor, but if I had an upstairs neighbor, that they would dangle their parents' head down to me. I wouldn't think that would happen. I mean, now I'm going to think that after reading this, but I didn't used to, okay? Anyways, an old woman living in the neighborhood invites Chizumi and Ogawara over for some cake. And of course, because Chizumi does everything really weirdly, which is a character quirk I love, by the way. Chizumi just does nothing normally. She eats that cake like an absolute demon. And up until now, Chizumi's been wearing bandages on her face, which the reader can only assume was because of what Ogawara heard earlier coming from upstairs, you know, the parents just absolutely mogging their kids. It's a really bad way to put it. But no, Chizumi says she's just wearing them for fun because she's a master manipulator. So yeah, she had us thinking one thing. She was doing her own thing. She's in her own world. She's built different. Although it does seem like Yuma is definitely getting beaten. Having enough of all the weird antics that are going on in the building, a man in the building goes to confront the Ozawa parents, and the facade definitely starts to slip now. When he opens the door to confront them, their faces are literally dripping off, dissolving off, if you will, and shit's fucked up, okay? Shit is fucked up. They get into a little bit of a hand-to-hand scuffle, and Yuma comes out and gets on top of the man and starts apologizing to him, which the man kicks him off like he's like a pest, which was really funny and deserved. Yuma's a bitch. He's a little asshole. But also in the back of your mind, you kind of feel bad for the guy because he is definitely going to dissolve now. So... And while eating cake at the old woman's house, Ogawara notices a dripping coming from the ceiling. And wouldn't you know, the old woman is a floor below the old man's room, so he's dissolving. But the issue is, it's not just the man who's dissolving. Everyone begins to dissolve. I thought this one was going to go well. I don't know why. I'm an idiot. But no, everyone dissolves. Really, really dark ending. Ogawara is dead. The old woman is dead. It is really messed up, and as a reader you just feel so damn hopeless reading these stories. I mean, what are you gonna do besides turn the page and see even grosser, even darker things? It's horrible, but really nice too. But it's also really darkly funny because Chizumi's singing about how they have to move again, so clearly they don't take it too seriously, which is nice. I'm glad to see someone besides the messed up readers like myself are having fun with this, okay? We're gonna get a little romantic with the next story, which is called Okay, so to its credit, while Dissolving Classroom is a little bit of a repetitive manga, this one does some interesting things that I really like that kind of reinvent the wheel. Firstly, as you could gather with the title, Chizumi in Love, this one is a little bit of a different premise. But now that I say that, I kind of feel like that's bullshit because the last one, Dissolving Beauty, was about dating. So scratch that. What am I talking about? But whatever. The main difference that I really want to talk about, and the thing that had me scared shitless from the very first page, is that the protagonist from this story is a boy. A child. A simple child. Which is terrifying because so far, either every protagonist has ended up with brain damage or has died. So going into this, I'm not very optimistic for our boy Tomihito. It's funny too because rumors are going around about what Chizumi and Yuma are doing. Like, the town isn't oblivious to this. Rumblings are starting. People are talking. At the very beginning of the story, our protagonist Tomihito is getting chased by Chizumi, and she is running freakily fast. She's running like she has one for all or something. It is not normal. When she eventually does catch up to him, she licks him, and runs away. It is just as bad as I'm describing. If not grosser, actually. I think I'm being nice. And Yuma catches up to Chizumi in that same forest where she licked that poor boy. And it seems like he's kind of trying to change Chizumi's ways, trying to reform things. Personally, I don't believe that bullshit for a second. This little devil worshiper is fucking insane. But maybe I'll give him some benefit of the doubt, okay? To his credit, Tomihito is actually dodging some of the more usual traps set up in these stories pretty well. But the issue is Yuma already issued a formal apology to his parents. So things are already looking a little glum. Tomihito ends up staying home from school because he feels kind of sick. And eventually he gets up from bed and goes to talk to his parents. His parents talk about what Yuma did, which was apologizing profusely. And while laughing about how weird the instance is, they melt. They dissolve in classroom. They completely melt. Just dribbins all down the face. Tomihito runs out of the house and is pretty much lost until he bumps into Yuma, of all people. How wonderful. To this point in the story, though, he's never met Yuma, so he doesn't really know how screwed he is, and Yuma leads him into his house, where Chizumi is presumably waiting. And the instant he gets let into the house, I'm gonna be honest, I think his odds are cooked. I think he's ruined. Once inside the house, Chizumi comes out. I'm sorry, I can't help from laughing. She comes in with horrible makeup and she's trying to actually impress Tomihito with this. Maybe he'll think she's cute or something, but she still looks really weird. Weirder, I should say. After this whole little reveal of hers, Yuma tries to act cunt and start apologizing, but Tomihito isn't having any of it. Chizumi actually told him earlier in the story the whole secret of his apologies, and doesn't really have much reason not to believe her, so he's getting freaked out by this point. He's terrified. She then... Sorry about that, guys. She jumps at Tomihito, and after lunging at him, Yuma starts to explain a little story about Chizumi's origin. He says that he's actually a literal devil child and is the child of the devil, and I'm not sure if I completely believe this because there's a lot of like lore that they sort of throw onto you little by little throughout the story, but it can be kind of inconsistent, which is fun. It switches things up for sure. And then it's interesting too because you don't really know the children don't really have a motivation throughout these stories. They're just evil for the fun of it. I think while Yuma tries to deny it, I think he enjoys it, and Chizumi doesn't even try to like act like she doesn't love all this. So I think they're just having a lot of fun. You know, let kids be kids, right? And then things get really, really fucked up when Chizumi starts to drink Ogawara. Like, she has all her dissolved juices inside of a bottle, and she starts drinking them. And Ogawara was our protagonist from the last story, Dissolving Apartment. So it's just, it's gross, it's creepy, it's really bad. They tie him up, and then this is the part of the story that's probably my favorite. Inexplicably, the bottles start to like come alive. They start talking to Tomihito, and they start giving him tips on how to survive. It is sick. They start like unscrewing themselves and opening up, and while they're spilling across the floor, all that like, oh my god, grease and human bits lets Tomihito slip out from under the ropes. And oh my god, recounting this to you guys, these stories are so fucking disgusting. It is awesome. I love it. Call me morbid, but it is so cool. I love it. Junji Ito, he's an interesting individual for sure. I enjoy that. But actually, like every good final girl, or in this case, final boy, Tomihito runs away from the house, and he just keeps running, not looking back intentionally, really, because who knows where the siblings are. But it seems like we actually got a good ending for once, guys. Tomihito made it. Round of applause for Tomihito. GOAT status. I can't say that this short story was the most interesting because it is pretty formulaic in the grand scheme of things. It does follow the pattern pretty much. But in terms of action, this one is definitely the best. The action in this one is just nonstop. Like, this really feels like a classic horror movie from like the 80s or something. It's really interesting. This one is definitely one of the more interesting ones. But again, it falls into that trap of sort of following the whole pattern of like new characters introduced. By some chance, they're introduced to Chizumi or Yuma. They do their regular antics, they end up either dead, or in this case, escaping, and that's just kind of how it goes. I didn't really mind that as much in this one and the first one, because those are shorter. Dissolving Apartment did feel like a little bit much, because while my descriptions are pretty brief of them, that one was a long story. It was, I think, like 20 or 30 pages, I could be wrong, but that one was definitely a bit more lengthy and very formulaic. So that one was a little bit weaker, but this one was interesting. They kept it short, they kept it brief, and I think they kind of knew by now that like things were getting a little bit stagnant, you know? I think it was the right direction to take this manga, and here's Interview with the Devil. Interview with the Devil is really cute in the sense that like it really culminates the events from all the stories beforehand. There's a lot of characters from previous stories that we see in this one, and pretty much all loose ends are tied up by the end of this one. So in the beginning of the story, a local reporter is doing a story on the various rumors that have popped up about the siblings at this point, and he wheels in Keiko from the first story, who's back, and her knowledge is going to be utilized to hopefully take down the siblings. The reporter has a hunch that all these like various dissolving and melting cases are connected, which is the correct hunch, of course, and he's trying to get an interview with Yuma, the supposed proprietor, but obvious proprietor, of these incidents. It's really sad, however, because Keiko is definitely not herself. She's a shell of her former self. She has severe brain damage from the incidents from the first story because probably like half of her brain melted off. But things are already looking hopeless from the start because Yuma is already apologizing to both of them, and Chizumi isn't even trying to act normal. She's on the roof for whatever reason. She gives her usual spiel to both of these characters about how Yuma has a unique relationship with the devil and all the stuff he gets into. The reporter is inclined to believe her this time, unlike the other protagonists. He believes her. After Chizumi's admission, Yuma starts to apologize for her behavior, to which Keiko utterly freaks the fuck out to. Of course, she's seen this all before. She knows what's gonna happen. So she's screaming and pleading to leave. So the reporter, like an asshole and also horrible, like survival instincts, basically traps her in the car. He wheels her into the back of the car and closes the trunk, which can't be safe because it would probably be really hot. But anyways, not important. He goes into the house himself to investigate, which is another awesome survival trait. Definitely, if you're ever in a horrific situation, do this, guys. Trap the person next to you and search the murderer's house alone, okay? That's a good plan. He's able to search the house because Yuma and Chizumi are already ready to skip town again. And the facade slips a little because Yuma starts trying to bury the heads of his parents. It's really morbid, but a little darkly comedic in my opinion. And he's just packing their bags and stuff and freaking out. It's just crazy to me how me describing this to you guys, like, it's just a logical progression at this point. These insane, out of this world scenarios, like, they're just like normal to me now. Like, I'm used to them. And that kind of rocks. Then things get really dark. We cut to a news reporter who's trying to find leads for the whole mystery, and he's going around tracing down the various people who've been affected by these events. And of course, the only one still alive from all this is Tomihito. But sorry to break it to you guys, they investigate on him and find out that in the orphanage he's now in, he was killed. Tomihito is kaputs. Honestly, I can't believe I didn't expect this, but I didn't expect this, and I'm not going to say I'm like emotionally damaged by this because none of the characters in these stories besides the two siblings are particularly interesting, really, or fleshed out at all for that matter. But, you know, Tomihito's just a kid. Like, that's really messed up. I don't object to it. I'm not going to say it's bad writing. I think it's actually pretty good because just in a world where everything else is natural except for the siblings' like powers and relationship with the devil, there would be no winning, really. I mean, you can't really do anything about this. And Tomihito is just another unfortunate victim of that. Mad respect to Junji Ito because in my opinion, horror should not have an age limit. I say anyone is fair game. So we cut back to the siblings and they're sleeping in tents above the city, and their sleep is interrupted by the reporter who wants to ask them a few more questions. He actually turns out to be kind of a badass because he's straight up threatening Yuma about the stories that are about to come out about them too. He's even like unfazed by Yuma's various apologies, which is pretty brazen, but also kind of badass, you know? Stupid, but cool. Buckle in though, because things are about to go to complete 100 from now on. It's actually revealed in a twist that the reporter is not any average Jimmy Olsen reporter, guys. He's the fucking devil. He was working with the siblings the entire time. I don't know if the siblings know that. It's not really made clear. He's trying to do some nefarious things. But still posing as a reporter, he sets up with the whole news agency a local apology that will be televised on air from a local conference hall. You can only imagine where this is going to go from here. I really didn't see it. I thought the siblings would finally have what was coming to them. They'd be publicly shamed, maybe arrested, something like that. But no, they stay winning. The big conference is set up and it goes exactly how you would think, but it's still creepy as hell. They're at a platform with a bunch of mics set up and it's being live streamed to people at home too. So he gets on his knees, jumps up and does a huge, massive apology, to which the people in the room are all completely melted, including Keiko. R.I.P. girl. You made it pretty far, but not far enough. And then the story kind of finishes on like an up to interpretation note, because you don't really know how many people saw this, you don't really know how many people were affected. And it ends with a badass one-page spread of the devil like looming over the world. Or looming over the town, I should say. Let me not be so dramatic either. I would love to hear your headcanons, by the way, on where you think the siblings are going to go from here. Personally, I think they're going to start like a podcast where maybe Yuma can apologize, Shizumi can tell crazy stories. And yeah, I think that could be a great way to turn around their reputation, I'm honestly glad the sibling stories are kind of over, because where do you really go from there? And it was getting pretty damn repetitive. This story was pretty good. It definitely sounds interesting in a condensed summary, I would say. But I would say it was one of the weaker ones, because by now, you know what's going to happen. You know the pattern, and this one sticks to it very closely. The twist was pretty cool, that the reporter was a devil. I can't say I saw it coming. I'm not going to say it was a magnum opus of twists, but it was a good one. I was satisfied. But fuck Yuma and Shizumi, we got The Return. So The Return wasn't particularly scary or eerie in my opinion, but it was definitely an interesting story. So The Return is about this man's fiance who's on her deathbed, and as he's comforting her, she says curiously enough that she'll be back. So the man tries to go on with his life, but he's looking for signs of life and death where he goes. He's been going to cemeteries, nurseries where babies were just born, trying to, see when that return is coming. One day as he's at home, a meteor hits right next to his house. He goes outside to investigate it, and there's this weird little mangled corpse in the center of the meteor. The common people were never able to identify this body, but the husband knows that it was his wife. He knows that because when he walked to the nearby forest, there was a hand with the very engagement ring that he gave her right next to it. So yeah, it just kind of ends on a gotcha moment with the meteor being his wife. And if you're confused, I am too. I mean, cool. I'm not glad that it's your wife, but what the fuck was that? He was looking for signs of life and death, and then the meteor came down, but she was just mogged already. She was already dead. She wasn't even in the thing hey husband, I'm back. Maybe she started acting weird, acting evil. No, she was just dead in there, just like a scrambled egg, really. Just so strange. And I know that summary was really short, but the story is actually only 6 pages, and the next one is too. They're very quick, so yeah, it just kind of leaves you to sit with what was almost the point of that, which sounds like a negative, but I kind of feel like that was almost the whole point of the story. The man had hope because she said she'd be back, and he really believed her, and she did come back, but she was just dead again on arrival. So yeah, it's kind of depressing, but interesting. See, it's you see what I mean now? It's not scary, it's not eerie, but it's interesting. You're damn, why did that all happen? And it's just kind of hopeless and meaningless, but that is the point. Damn, telling this to you guys actually rock with it a lot more than when I initially read it. Almost I don't know, it's a lot to think about. Almost it's not the deepest thing in the world, but yeah, thinking about it, I'm damn, why did that all happen? And again, I'm just refreshed not to be saying Yuma and Shizumi. They're great, don't get me wrong. They're semi-iconic characters. And no, I'm not gonna lie. Who the fuck knows Shizumi and Yuma? But they're very interesting characters, but their abilities lend to a very cyclical story. So to be getting something outside of that at the end of this book was very interesting to me. Junji Ito definitely could have just ended the story and have it just been those stories about the siblings, but to include 2 little really quick bonus ones, I think was a really cute idea. The next story is our final one. So Children of the Earth also wasn't scary, but the vibes were immense. This was another weird ass but very interesting story. On a school trip one day, a group of kindergartners go missing and the parents start a search party to look for them. They go deep into the woods and eventually they do find the kids, but it's sort of weird. They're all buried in dirt, but just buried to stomach level. They're just kind of not floating there, but they're just there. Here's the thing. When the parents start to pull out their children, the children don't stop. They're just pulling, and it's more and more stomach Like, imagine Plastic Man if you're a DC fan. It's just like that, just wiggling and stretching around. I really hope my mic isn't making noise. They're just like stretching out infinitely. But then it's even fucking weirder. They stretch until randomly they just super fast get sucked back into the hole. Just, and the hole patches itself over and it's just dirt. Just a patch of dirt. It is so weird. Like, that was it. That's the last time those parents ever saw their children. That was all. And the story concludes with saying the only theory people can think of is that the children were born from the earth, and in that very moment, they returned to it. Like, what the hell was that? Why did it all happen? It was so quick. It was so simple. But it was cool. It was cool as hell. Those last two stories were really, really freaking cool. Like, why did all that happen? Why did the wife get mogged in the meteor? Why did the kids get sucked into the hole? We don't know. There's no explanation. It happened in the blink of an eye. And it was kind of fucking cool. This one is just really open up to interpretation. And I think it was a really rich and fulfilling way to use 6 pages, you know? Very efficient use of 6 pages of manga. This one reminded me of the only other Junji Ito story I've read, the one where it's like, oh, this is my hole, you know, and people kept like crawling into like the walls of a cave. Obviously that one's a lot better. This one is 6 fucking pages, and that one is really, really good. That's a very good story. Probably better than all the ones in Dissolving Classroom, if I'm being honest. But yeah, it was kind of similar to that one. Very open, people getting stuck in weird places, and yeah. That was Children of the Earth. If you're confused, I am too, and I think that's exactly what Junji Ito wanted. But before I'm done summarizing the story, there actually is a 1-page afterword, which is hilarious. This was actually kind of the first page I read, because I have this really, really fucking toxic trait where when I buy a manga, before I read it, I like flip through all the pages, trying to look at the art and stuff. And I saw the afterword, and it looked kind of funny, which was interesting to me because I obviously knew going in that this was going to be like a horror manga. So I decided to read it, and yeah, this one is really funny. They kind of pretend that Yuma and Chizumi are like played by actors, you know, and Chizumi is played by Chizumi, interestingly enough. And they just sort of play it off like everything never really happened and it was a joke, you know? Basically, it starts off with the actor for Yuma explaining that public apologies have become like a really big thing lately, presumably in Japan. Like, people going to press conferences, apparently, I don't know if this is true, but all the time for infidelity and other sins of that sort. And he says that the readers probably have something they need to apologize for. So we should all join Yuma for a very, very sincere apology. I'm sorry, guys. I'm so sorry. Please forgive me from the bottom of my heart, for I am so sorry. But yeah, that was like a little summary with a little bit of my thoughts about Dissolving Classroom. And the video's not fucking over yet, okay? This is a summary / review for a reason. I'm gonna put on my reviewer's ring and not just be a glorified reteller of stories, okay? I do have thoughts on this. My head is full of them, overflowing with logical and smart ideas. So here they are. Wow. That was a fucking fail. Yeah, Dissolving Classroom, it's certainly an interesting manga. You know, it's not the most innovative or interesting manga I've ever read, but for something that you just kind of want to like lay back in the sun in the afternoon one day and read a good manga, this is a good manga. You know, I'm not going to say it's going to change your life. You're not going to remember it on your deathbed, but it's a good read, you know? It's something we could all use. Sometimes a 3-star movie on Letterboxd changes your life. Sometimes a 3-star manga, quote unquote. That's not my official review. Don't take that for my official review yet. But sometimes a 3-star manga can change your life, you know? If Dissolving Classroom changes your life, I'm glad to hear it. But for me, I just had fun reading a horror manga. That's not a genre I usually read. I'm a big shonen boy. I always have been for the 4 years I've been collecting manga. It's primarily what I read. I like to read books about usually teenage boys battling and fighting with some good themes in there. But I also love to challenge that. You know, while I do primarily read shonen, I have a Shonen Jump subscription, not whatever the hell is going on in Kodansha's app. That shit is a fucking mess. I do like to read other stuff, you know? So I think this was a great jump into that for me. I would love to read the other Junji Ito novels, especially No Longer Human, because that's one of my favorite novels of all time. but damn if they aren't fucking expensive as hell. I understand why they're hardcovers and they're usually like 3 volumes combined into that one big book, but fuck, if I could get 3 battle manga volumes or 2 3-in-1s instead of that one, or instead of that one expensive Junji Ito one, that's usually the decision I make. So keep in mind that Dissolving Classroom is a great introduction to Junji Ito while also not breaking the bank. I got this one secondhand for $10 at a local comic shop I go to, but on the back it says $12.95, which I think is a perfectly valid price for the stories you get. So for cons, I would say the main negatives of this story are just that they do get a little repetitive toward the end. You know, it is kind of that formula of siblings move to a new place, you follow a protagonist who will eventually die to the siblings, and Yuma apologizes, Chizumi acts crazy, and people dissolve. That's what happens. But to get those last 2 stories was really refreshing, and I think redeemed that in a way. And it's not the worst formula ever. You know, in my opinion, there's been worse use of repetitiveness in manga. An example I would go to would be like part 3 of JoJo's. While I love JoJo's, I didn't really enjoy the whole like villain of the week format of part 3. It was just kind of like, okay, let's fight this new dickhead who approached us until we get to Dio. Oh wait, there's another dickhead, let's fight him, etc., etc. While there's some great moments in that one, it is way too repetitive and a lot of episodes or chapters. I didn't read that one, I watched that one. So it's just kind of a lot. But yeah, another con I would have is that none of the protagonists are particularly interesting. It's obvious that the main focus is about the 2 siblings. I mean, none of our protagonists are on this case. You know, I don't even think Keiko is here. No, it's just a bunch of dissolving children with Chizumi and Yuma. But it would have been nice for them to at least have a personality. You know, is that too much to ask for? And that's pretty much all the complaints I have about this one. For pros, there's a bit. Yuma and Chizumi are obviously very interesting characters, and while their like quote-unquote powers lend to, again, a kind of repetitiveness, they're written insanely interesting. Yuma is sort of a quiet but deeply messed up. Like, you can sort of see, like, underneath the facade he puts up, that he's a really weird guy, and he has a very weird relationship with Satan. And Chizumi is personally my favorite sibling of the 2. She's just batshit crazy. Everything she does is wrong, which I find to be hilarious. Like, she's on the roof or putting bandages on her face for fun. Like, she's just a weird ass kid. So the 2 siblings I have no complaints about. Great characters that I will remember for a long, long time. Another pro would be the artwork. The artwork is stunning in this one. Obviously, the gore and the disgustingness is done perfectly. Junji Ito is an incredible artist, and it is disgusting, it is bloody, it is fucked up, it is awesome. But I also like how he draws people. Every mangaka has their own style. That's obvious. Araki draws great characters, Yusuke Murata draws great characters, and Junji Ito is another one. It's sort of like an almost realistic sort of style, and it's just really satisfying. I did not see a single panel that I'm like, okay, this is kind of subpar, or this isn't what it could be. It was great. Another good thing about his artwork is that the locations are very fleshed out. You know, sometimes in manga, you'll be seeing a panel where it's just a character and maybe like a fully white background, but that's not the case in this one. The backgrounds are obviously very realistic. It's like towns or houses, but they're just, again, very realistic. Like, you can almost feel like you're watching a horror film when reading this manga, and that's just really cool. What I also like about these stories is that Junji Ito doesn't always just spell everything out, you know? There isn't always an explicit ending or an explicit conclusion you can come to. Sometimes it's up to interpretation. Sometimes you don't really know what happened, and I think that's really wonderful. You know, things don't always have to be black and white, which is ironic because it's manga. Terrible joke. Sometimes you just have to sit back and come to your own conclusion about what happened in a story, and I think that was a great direction to take with Children of the Earth, Interview with the Devil, and The Return, of course. And while repetitive, these stories were just fun, man. You know, they're not the deepest thing in the world. It doesn't go that deep, but they're fun. If you're a horror fan, if you're a manga fan, if you're a manga horror fan, read Dissolving Classroom. You know, it won't hurt. Overall, if I had to give this one a rating, I'd probably say a 7 out of 10 for Dissolving Classroom. Oh, and remember, if you want to win volumes 1 and 2 of 7 Deadly Sins, comment whatever the hell your heart desires in this video, and I will choose one of you guys and announce your name in the next video, and you can contact me on my Twitter or Gmail, and I will be giving you those books.